This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides, so head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more.
Welcome to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange with Sarah Raven and friends, and you will have noticed by now that it's not Sarah talking, it's me, Arthur. This week Sarah's having a little rest, and so I have taken over this week, and I'm joined by the wonderful Josie from Perch Hill, Josie Lewis, Sarah's head gardener, because it's the most wonderful time of year to talk about roses, and Josie is a complete rose genius. She's introduced so many roses to Perch Hill, and I don't know much about roses. I like them, but I really want to learn more. And so it's wonderful to have Josie here with us today because it's prime, I think, rose pruning time, isn't it, Josie?
Yes. Hello, Arthur.
Hello.
Nice to chat with you.
Yes.
Yes, it is. I've just been pruning, in fact. So, very good time to talk about it.
And just tell me, Josie, how many roses, because you've been at Perch Hill now, is it 10 years? Is it more?
Yes, I've done my 10 years.
You've done your 10 years. So in those 10 years, you have planted, I know, a complete canopy and forests areas of roses. I remember when I first came, you'd just started and the rose and herb garden had just been laid out.
Yes.
And before that, there weren't that many roses at Perch Hill, were there? But why, when you became head gardener, did you think, as well as the dahlias and everything else, that you really felt Perch Hill needed a good backbone of roses? What is it about them that you love?
Yeah, well, I think previously Sarah had been sort of put off by diseased roses, and so they were really missing, from the look of the place. So I thought we really need to get some roses in, to, especially, in the farmhouse garden as it is now, and obviously the rose and herb garden, we had to start off with roses. So we started planting, and the criteria I was looking for was roses that were guaranteed in a way to be really healthy. It's okay to stick with some of the old varieties, have a few that you love, but really go for these newer bred, really healthy, disease-free roses. There is quite a choice out there now, and they're really good roses.
There's definitely, isn't there, a pecking order of varieties, those cherished favourites that people love. But what I love whenever I do visit, what you've chosen often aren't the roses you come across at most garden centres. What is it that you're looking for in selecting those new roses to trial?
We're led by colour and scent. They have to be scented, and they have to be a good colour. And then I just look through their descriptions from the suppliers. And suppliers are really honest. They'll say these need spraying or whatever. So we, give those a really wide berth because we don't spray any roses here. We don't spray anything here because we're organic. So that's the main thing to look for, is that health guarantee from the start. And then you've got to give them the best life, really, which is, to me, is not fussing over them too much. You've got to treat them quite mean.
Okay.
So, when you're planting them, don't fill the hole with organic mulch. Put them back purely into the soil that they're going to grow in. Put the organic mulch on top, and then they don't get used to that soft life of a hole filled with organic mulch.
Okay.
So that's what we tend to do here. So they have to get used to the soil they're in.
So you're planting, I know most of the roses arrive at Perch Hill, most of them at this time of year, don't they, dormant as bare root. Would you always say that's best to try and plant them as bare root, or would you sometimes buy them containerised and then plant them out in the garden?
Containerised are fine, but you would be planting them from sort of April onwards through summer. That's more containerised planting time. And then you've got to be vigilant looking after them. Whereas if you plant bare roots now, the weather tends to water them, and they look after themselves, really.
Yeah.
And of course, bare root are cheaper as well.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
And all being well, we might have hopefully a wet spring. It's quite wet out there at the moment. It's quite a quagmire.
Very, yes.
With the hotter, drier spells, are you not having to water your established roses because they've been really well mulched? What would your rules be to get that rose doing well in its first year?
In the first year, you might have to water it if you've got a long, like not this summer, this in 23, but 22 was such a hot, dry summer. I'd have had to water newly planted roses, even if they were bare root.
Yes.
But this year it was sort of wet, spells of dry. That was fine. We didn't water any of our newly planted roses.
Yeah.
And any established roses we would not water. So it's all down to a thick organic mulch.
And that mulch, Josie, is it like when you're mulching around your roses? Obviously, most people have roses maybe in a mixed border.
Yes.
How much mulch per rose would you be wanting to put around that plant? And what should it look like by the time you've done the mulching?
So if we go back a step, so you've pruned your roses. We'll go into pruning in a bit more detail. Yeah. So you've pruned your rose. The important thing is to clear away all the leaves. So rake all the leaves off the soil. And when that's clear, because that's where the spores will hide. And
of black spot and things.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And then get a good thickish mulch on them, 2 or 3 inches, and spread that out where you imagine the spread of the roots would be. So, quite a wide. If it's a big rose bush, then obviously a wider area. If it's a smaller one, then you don't have to go so wide. If you're not mulching the whole border, that is.
Yes.
Which is the ideal scenario, but that obviously can take an awful lot of organic mulch.
A lot of you in the team's time, I've seen how you mulch the borders. It's quite incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it is a lot. That's right.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
So the pruning technique, I'm quite useless at pruning, but what me and Sarah would be doing all through the summer with our roses is, of course, cutting the flowers.
Yes.
So if you've got a rose like your beloved hot chocolate, who every fortnight's probably had all the flowers cut off it, hopefully down to a pair of leaves already.
Yeah.
With your, we'll start with the shrub roses and then carry on to the other groups. But with your typical shrub roses, which are hot chocolate, timeless purple, those kind of roses, how much should you be taking off when it comes to the pruning?
Yeah, when I get to some of them, they do look quite hacked about when the florists have finished with them. So, like hot chocolate, I would still take that down to 30 or 40 centimetres. So quite a long way down. That stands at 1.2 metres, something like that, 1.5 metres. Yeah. And I would take it really hard down, and then it'll shoot from there.
Yeah. So quite brutal, don't be timid is the rule with that sort of rose.
Yes, yeah. Well, you hear people will take hedge cutters to their roses, and that's absolutely, that's fine. But every second year you'd have to go in and still take out the dead and diseased wood. So, it's better to prune than not to prune. So, don't leave them just going from one year to the next with all the sad little spindly twigs on them, because they won't flower.
Right.
So, be harsh.
So you really are sort of gutting the shape just to get back to what is the prime skeleton thick stems, and you would take out any spindly, clawy-like growth at the base or...
Exactly. So anything dead, diseased, damaged, take that out first. And anything that's thinner than a pencil thickness, so take all those spindly bits out and open up the centre if you can. If it's that sort of rose that you can do that with. Yeah.
If you've got, say, maybe you've inherited a garden and got a really old, gnarled, fairy tale-like creature of a rose, what would you do with that? Would that be literally, as you've just said, be really brutal with it and encourage it to break fresh growth in the spring?
Yes, I'd look at it first to see if there's any new growth coming from low down. If it's really old and gnarled to the bottom, I wouldn't be quite so harsh on it. So I'd cut it 2/3 of where I normally would.
Okay.
So a third longer than I would normally leave it, and see what happens the following spring. And if it shoots back and does really well, then fine. The following year I'd be really hard on it.
Yep.
But I'm afraid I'm really hard with my roses. If I got to a garden, I'd let it flower. I mean, if it was
Okay.
something magnificent, I would try and keep it. But if it didn't enter that category, it would be off with its head. It would be gone.
Which brings us to a good point, because I've literally yesterday dug out a Gertrude Jekyll rose,
Yes, yeah.
which I hated, mainly because it was sugar pink and its growth was so thorny.
She's
it
very
attacked
pink.
me every time I went for it.
Yeah.
So that's been dug out. I can't now plant roses where it's been, can I? Or have you got a trick to allow me to?
Well, I mean, you could. They say you can take, because she wasn't sick.
No.
You know, if it was something that was diseased, and then I would sort of avoid that area of soil. But if she wasn't sick, you just dug her out because you didn't like her, which is quite understandable. Then I would try and go, 50 centimetres along the border a bit, so you're not using exactly the same spot, if that's possible. They do say, dig out the whole of that soil, import fresh soil, or, put a cardboard box in with new soil in it. But to me, the soil's all about mycorrhizal fungi and the living biome that is down there. So if you're digging all that out, that soil then has to re-establish itself. All the mycorrhizal fungi have to re-establish in that area, which to me is a bit counterintuitive. But it is long established saying that you shouldn't plant in the same place because you'll get this rose sickness. But whether a certain rose has a specific fungus associated with it, and that won't get on with the next rose. But this is all sciencey stuff that people probably just don't. We haven't investigated enough, really.
The mycorrhizal fungi is sort of a new thing that a lot of people are getting into the habit of buying. Is there merit in investing in the mycorrhizal fungi when you're planting your bare root roses? Do you use it?
Let's say there's going to be no harm in it.
Okay.
I'll say no more.
But your organic mulch is key.
Yeah,
and
what's
looking
on top.
after your real soil as well.
Exactly that. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. So continuing with pruning then.
Yes.
We'll go back to climbers, and because climbers and ramblers, it gets more tricky, doesn't it? Because I do think people get them mixed up.
Yeah, they do.
So how do you distinguish really between the two, to be honest?
And ramblers, although there's always exceptions to the rule, they tend to have that one huge flush of roses, like rambling rector and things like that, spectacular.
Yeah.
And they grow up trees. Don't put a rambler on an arch or expect to be able to train it. A rambler is a huge thing. If you want something over an arch or a pergola or the front of your house, then, put in a climber, something that's specifically marked as a climber. And all the better if it's marked as a short climber. Ramblers, you tend to take out the large, if it needs, generally they don't need much looking after. You just let them get on with it. But if you need to take some of the stems out, you take them out in summer. That's the difference between ramblers and the other roses. The other roses are winter pruned. Ramblers are in after the main flush of flowers in summer. But climbers, you prune like your hybrid teas and your floribundas and everything else. So they'll be from, we start now with them and go on until February, March even. You prune right up until the point where they're really getting into growth. So the climbers, like on the front of the staffroom wall, the alchemist on there, that's quite an established rose. So we would untie most of that and take out older growth and tie in the new ones that have been sent up. And you want to get those stems as horizontal as possible because that's what promotes flowering. You want to get the end of the stem lower than the main part of the stem, so that'll allow all the side nodes on it to send up flowering shoots. It's a lot of untying and retying.
What do you like to use, Josie, to tie your roses with? Because I have horrible childhood trauma of my granddad using washing line and things.
Oh, yes.
What do you like? What's nice for the rose to be tied in with?
Either string, jute string, or what we tend to use here is Flexitie. That very flexible, and that's reusable. So we use that year after year. We can untie it and then use the same piece to retie the rose. So it's
so
quite
it doesn't
good for
dig
that.
into the stem.
Yeah, that's right. It's very soft on the rose. Yeah, and you get different diameters of Flexitie, so the thicker one is better for rose stems. Yeah, so tie it all back, cut it all back, and it'll be flat against the building, and ready to go then in spring.
Yeah.
And also, you can do the like Sissinghurst do, training, making domes and shapes and things. And I'm sure you've seen them on Instagram. There's people who create these
incredible
fabulous
photos
domes,
think,
and I mean, it's sort of a life's work, isn't it?
I mean, I know you don't do all the hazel bending.
No.
But would you advise people at this time of year to really be looking for your thick hazel posts, to be banging those in around the roses that are going to be heavy?
Exactly.
Is that something people should be doing now as well as pruning?
Yes, absolutely. If anybody's got access to the hazel poles, and if you want to do those bent rose domes, choose thinner stems of hazel. But if you are just using it for staking, like you're saying, then slightly thicker hazel is perfect for that. And as the leaves come off, it's a really good time to be looking, isn't it? Because you can see the stem thickness a lot easier.
Yeah, definitely. The rose garden, the gardens that you've created at Perch Hill, what I love about them is they don't look like traditional rose gardens.
No.
With the way Sarah wants things and Adam wants things to be romantic and luscious and integrate tulips and biennials. Was that something you had to learn, or was it something that you took inspiration from in another job or from your childhood?
Not so much from my childhood, because we didn't have, we just grew produce really. Yeah. So rose never got a look in, but as I've got my own gardens through my life, I've planted roses, but always intermingled with anything else. There is something which I cannot bear, and that's to see a rose garden with nothing else planted in it. All you see is a whole load of bare legs and nothing else. So definitely don't do that. It's not good for the roses. It's not a good look. It's more in historic houses you tend to see that, and that's fine, because they're carrying on that's been done for decades. But I don't think that's an excuse for it anyway, really.
Because I've seen you at work, and you have to battle with the romance of all this lavishness with practicals. So I know, for example, honesty self-seeds like mad, doesn't it? Where you've got a lot of roses and opium poppies, but you have a very good way of being ruthless, but allowing a few to still be there, so the whole rose garden still looks animated with spires and domes as well as the roses. That's
it. You're always exactly as you're saying. You want it to have different shapes, so that lots of spires if you can. The taller growing salvias, like curvy flora that send up those lovely straight ones. They look great with roses.
Yeah, we should mention the salvias, shouldn't we? Because they're your number one thing at helping not have black spots. So if anybody maybe hasn't got the salvia genemsis, is that the main one, Josie?
The microphyllars, anything with the tiny leaves. Yeah.
Yeah. So if anyone's not got those, you'd probably recommend them being planted around your roses in this coming June, I would have thought, if you've not got them already.
Yes, plant them in spring once the worst of the weather has passed. Get your salvias ready and in, and they emit a sulfurous compound when they heat up in the sun, and that helps act against the black spot and fungus in general. Yeah.
And I should mention what I know you've started doing with your thorniest rose prunings is they've now become very good, not biological control, but organic, humane
mammal control
against squirrels.
Yes.
Because one of my favourite Instagram posts was a photo you put up of this beautiful copper tub that had just been planted up with bulbs, and it was almost like a cherry pie pastry cake.
Yes.
You'd layered your rose prunings. So who came up with that idea? Because it works, doesn't it, against the squirrels with the bulb feeding?
I've seen people talking about holly leaves and using those to deter squirrels from eating your bulbs. So as I was pruning our rugosa roses, I thought, this might work. So we had to go, and they didn't, because I thought, they might just move them aside. But all the pots with those really prickly stems on didn't get touched at all. So it's quite good.
Brilliant.
It doesn't look quite as, the wire netting is obviously the best deterrent. But it's slightly prettier than that. Like you say, it's more like a pie, isn't it? Than
a pie you can't eat or go near.
Yes, exactly. So, and it's a good way of using up your prunings as well. So, go for Rugosa roses if you've got them. Those are the prickliest roses, but anything works. Hot chocolate. She's a prickly girl.
So I presume you've probably got bare root roses in store right now, waiting in the wings to be planted on a frost-free, mild day.
Yes.
How are you storing your bare root roses when they arrive to when you're planting them?
So they come in quite nicely packaged anyway, so that the suppliers tend to obviously look after their roots. You want to keep the roots damp. So if you can't plant for a couple of days, then they're fine in that packaging. I always tend to open the tops. I think of them as like giving them some air and leave the roots covered. But then if you can't get to planting them for any reason for quite a few days or weeks even, then take them out of their packaging and plant them just in a big pot. So maybe the ground's waterlogged or frozen, or life takes over. Sometimes you just can't get to planting them. So put them in a big pot with their roots covered in compost, whatever you've got in any organic matter. Or you can, what we call healing them in, so you can make a rough trench actually in the garden, not necessarily where you want to plant them. So just make a trench and just pop them in that and cover them with soil. And then when it comes round to time when you can actually plant them, then dig them a proper hole and spread their roots out and plant them properly then.
Yeah. And what roses are you looking forward to planting this winter? And what are your favourite roses that you've planted over the past couple of years?
Okay. Well, Gary, who's been on this podcast a few times, has found some roses. So he said there'll be some on the way, but I haven't quite looked them up yet. So
I'll be interested to see what. Google them yet.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. But ones that I've really enjoyed. So for two short climbers that I really love. The Simple Life, which is a white, the flower is very simple, beautiful dark apricot anthers, which really stand out in the centre. They're really good for wildlife and very well behaved. It just flowers for months and months. Usually when we come to prune it, it's still flowering. It's one of those that you have to cut off flowers as well as all the old stems. And the other one is Scent from Heaven. Do you know that? The apricot-y climber that was on the drive fence, highly scented, but didn't, because the farmhouse is sort of changing colour palette, it didn't quite fit in with that. So we removed that and put it elsewhere. So that's gone to the side of the school now. So, that's another thing. If your roses, you're not happy with where they are, you dig them up and move them.
Yeah, when they're dormant.
It's not a thing that you've got to put up with for the rest of every time you look out of your window and think, I'll put that in the wrong place. Dig it up and move it. That's fine. What about you, Arthur? What are some of your favourites?
Well, Gertrude Jekyll's gone. And she has gone, I'm afraid, in the bin.
Okay,
I'm afraid. Wasn't able to find a home for her.
Right.
But in her place, I'm planting a rose that I think you'll have known, Red Bengal, which is like
very
Metarbliss.
bright red.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And I'm hoping it's just going to look really whimsical against, I'm going to grow a clematis behind it. So I've got Red Bengal. I've also got one that I know you had on trial a few years ago now, Calendar Girl. I think she's coming.
Oh, what a fabulous rose, yes. Yeah.
And also Night Owl, which I think was also on trial when I last saw you at Perch Hill, which like the Simple Life is single.
Yes.
Because I want more of my roses to be bee and butterfly friendly rather than just being completely double and sterile.
Yes.
So I've got those to get in. And now I've got your top tips, I'm going to know exactly how to do it.
What to do. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I've also been loving the Timeless series.
Yes. So the Timeless Purple is the one a lot of people know. Is there going to be more to that series then that are coming out? Yeah,
we've tried out 3 additional colours this year. We'll give them another trial next year. They need 2 years really before we say yes or no. But they're looking promising. But I would definitely look out for the Timeless timeless, or
because they're
timeless
very good
purple.
cut flowers, aren't they?
Exactly. Yes. Very healthy.
And healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Great. Is it true it takes 10 years to breed a rose?
Yes, it is
that
something
true?
like that. Yes. Yeah.
So that is why they cost what they cost,
That's
isn't
it,
it?
yes.
It's the cost of the breeding.
They can seem expensive, but if you think of the number of years that it's taken to get that far, and they start off with thousands of seedlings, imagine weeding them out over the years, this is not so healthy. You've got to look at it year after year. And then, finally, 7 to 10 years, I think, before it hits the shelves. So,
wow.
Yeah, and we sort of complain that they cost what they do, but some of them can last you a lifetime, literally. And if you think of the work that's gone into getting them to that stage, then, you can see that it's quite worthwhile.
Beautiful. Well, Josie, you know so much about them. You've done 2 episodes previously. I'm just going to read them out. The 12 best roses of all time. That's episode 98. And then The Wonderful World of Roses, where you break all the roses down at Perch Hill into colour groups. That's episode 58. And both those episodes have got really in-depth notes. And if you follow Josie on Instagram, I think there's videos on there of you planting bare roses.
There will be.
There definitely is on YouTube, the Sarah Raven's Garden YouTube channel. So there's lots of stuff out there for you to know exactly how to prune and plant your roses this winter. And it's a wonderful thing to do, isn't it, Josie, on a nice mild winter day?
That's
planting
it.
Something that you know is going to be there for years
decades. Yeah, absolutely.
Afterwards.
Yes. Yeah, quite.
Well, I'll let you get back to the garden, Josie. It's been lovely to chat roses to you.
Get back to my rose pruning.
Look out,
Thank
hot
you.
chocolate.
Yes, that's
Bye,
it.
Josie.
Thank you, Arthur.
Thanks very much for listening to Grow Coquita Range with Josie Lewis and Arthur Parkinson on roses. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it and found it very interesting. And next week, it's me and Arthur again, and we're going to be talking about literally what we will be doing to decorate our Christmas houses and our Christmas tables. So, ideas for very simple domestic loveliness over Christmas. You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.